Okay, what is actually a subtype, like a legit subtype? The subtype, essentially, it tells you the functional strengths, and it shows you how people of the same personality type can have different flavors, can seem either like stereotypically extroverts or like ambiverts or in between. A legit subtype, this comes from a different kind of personality type theory, but it's also based on Carl Jung. It's called Socionics. And in that system, basically you still have the 16 types, but there are 3 flavors of each type, and that depends on the subtype. So there are 3 different subtypes. First subtype, I would call it first subtype. It's the subtype of the first function. Second subtype of the second function, and no subtype, meaning there's no preferred function. So an introvert or an extrovert who has the first subtype is classically introverted or classically extroverted, in the sense that the introvert with the first subtype, they're gonna have limited energy, they're gonna be quite internally focused, they are prone to long stretches of isolation that have to be broken through by the outside world, or by them actually finally being like, okay, I have to get out of this, like so-called introversion loops. The extrovert, on the other hand, the extrovert of the first subtype is more externally focused, has higher energy levels, tends to also be more talkative, though, as a disclaimer, some extroverts could be this subtype but not be that talkative because they are insecure or shy. This is another issue. But if you're not insecure or shy, you're just being yourself, then still you're going to be very talkative, highly energetic, and so forth when you have the first subtype and you're an extrovert. And this problem with this person is that they lack reflection and they lack quiet time. They basically do not go into the internal world often enough. So this is another issue. This kind of personality type tends to also be better at their so-called tertiary function. It's like an ESFP SE first subtype is going to be the strongest at extrovert sensing, and they're gonna have boosted extrovert thinking, so they're gonna come across like an ST. Also, the thing is with the first subtype, their weakness is their so-called inferior function in MBTI. It's actually something that they value, but it's the opposite of their first function, so they're quite weak at that. So for the first subtype, the challenge is that because they are valuing their first function the most, which is the main way of how they interact with life, with their inner or outer world, it's going to be tricky for this kind of person to be surrounded by people who do not value this function. So people who have the first subtype function tend to be the least adaptable in this manner. It's hard for them because the first function is who you are, and if it's also boosted, it's going to be really tricky to be around people who do not care for it and who do not understand it, who do not value it. It's really difficult for these kinds of people. When it comes to their own purpose and life journey, they have to find a way to really accept themselves and to be in environments that truly value this function. This is the best for them, to be around people who value it, who like it as well. And this is going to be usually people who are the same personality type as them, or who are at least those who also have it as their valued function, or is there an MBTI as one of their 4th functions. So let's take ESFP again. ESFP, who is the SE subtype, the first subtype, they need to be around people who also value extrovert sensing. So this is going to be anyone who is ESFP, ESTP. ISTP is a bit tricky, but then also ISFP, and also ENTJ, INTJ, ENFJ, INFJ. These are going to be interesting and valuable and important people in their lives. This is more important for this subtype. So yeah, the challenge is to accept oneself and to find an environment that values that function. This is something that applies to all people, but this is especially crucial for this subtype. The no subtype is interesting. It's, so to speak, the average type version. So no subtype means not the first and not the second function is more valued or more boosted or stronger or whatever. So the no subtype version, this is the most baseline level version of this type. And this person pendles between introversion and extroversion from time to time, like we all do. We all have introverted and extroverted functions in us. But based on whether we are an introvert or extrovert, we tend to be more in the introverted world or more in the extroverted world. And the person who is no subtype, they tend to pendle between these two worlds from time to time as the need arises. So this person, their strengths are going to be their first function and also their so-called demonstrative. It's called demonstrative in Socionics. It's basically the other direction of the second function. So let's say let's take ESFP, right? So the first function of ESFP is extroverted sensing. The second function is introverted feeling. And an ESFP who is no subtype is going to be equally strong at extroverted sensing and extroverted feeling. This is the demonstrative in Socionics. So they're equally good at their extroverted functions, at those two, okay? And with the introvert who is no subtype also, there's going to be two functions that are on the same strength level. I'm starting to feel like this person's actually having the best of both worlds. I used to believe that it's more advantageous to be the so-called ambivert subtype, right? Because then you are going from one world to the other more frequently and with more intensity. But actually, now I feel like the people who are actually the no subtype, like the average, so to speak, average type, is actually the best because you are not tied to any specific world in this manner. You do not have these strong bursts. You have still some kind of flexibility because you are not just attached or not just have all your strength in one function, which is the case if you are either one subtype, like the first or second. Usually one function is really your strongest and the others are under it. Versus with no subtype, you've got two functions that you are equally strong at. It's not as strong as if you were one of the other subtypes, and there's not as much specialization going on, but it's still, sort of more balanced. So this can be more advantageous in the long run. It's easier to deal with. These people don't have as many, I find not as many problems trying to find their place in the world. But that's just my impression. Okay, and then this is the special kind of subtype. This is the subtype that creates the most issues. Now, also the first subtype often gets mistyped as a different type, but this is the most commonly mistyped one in my experience. The second subtype, you can even call it the ambivert subtype because it's the second function. It is the second world of yours. And when you are the subtype, you lean towards extroversion or introversion in a certain ambiverted manner. So, as you know, in Carl Jung, in his system, he basically by the way, came up with introversion, extroversion. According to him, ambiversion doesn't exist. Not in the sense that you would think. No one is exactly 50-50 ambivert, like 50-50 intro and extrovert. We all have both, so ironically we are all sort of ambiverted, but not in the sense that it's 50-50. It's at least 51% versus 49%. So my analogy for that is it's either AM or PM, right? There's the afternoon, there's the evening and all that, but it's still AM versus PM. And this is sort of how it works also with the types. So, okay, so with the ambiverted subtype, as I said, they are easily mistaken for either extrovert or introvert. So an introvert whose second function, ambivert, they are often mistyped as extroverts. And the extrovert who has the second function is often mistyped as introvert. Not always, but it's pretty common. Even for the people themselves. The people themselves who try to type themselves, they often mistype themselves as either introvert or extrovert. Anyhow, so the introvert who has the second subtype is going to have bursts of extroverted activity and energy, and it's going to be sustainable for a few days, usually. They're going to be on higher energy for a few days. But then it might just go down again and they go back to being like a typical introvert, and then they go back to like having these, I don't know, extroverted escapades, you might say. Or they, you know, it has this on-off quality to it. And the same can be applied to the extrovert, just in the reverse. So an extrovert who has the second subtype, especially when it's strong, they're gonna have moments or like bursts of like being almost stereotypical introverts, like just being focused in their own world, and then they also snap out of it again. And it can last for some time, some bursts here and there, especially if they are a P-type, but you can tell it's not really who they are as a whole. Like, as a whole, they still have this certain tendency, and this certain tendency is either higher or lower energy, external, internal focus, and so forth. So yeah, as I said, because the introvert with the second subtype or the extrovert with second subtype, because they go into this other world much more frequently, they are much more aware of it, and that's why they often mistype as either I or E in the system. An introvert who has the second subtype, their biggest functional strength, also with the extrovert, is going to be the so-called demonstrative function, and it is a function that you do not value, that is still their main orientation. Okay, so let's go back to ESFP. ESFP, who is the FI subtype, the second subtype, their biggest strength is going to be extroverted feeling. Let that sink in. This is really weird, right? But this is how the system works, in the way how the functions are boosted, because, yeah, being an extrovert and being a feeling type, all EF types are going to be good at extroverted feeling. This is how it works in Socionics. And because the ESFP has boosted feeling, their FE is also going to be stronger. It sounds really weird, but it makes so much sense, and it helps so much with typing people when you're aware of this. Because ESFP, FI people almost always get mistyped as FE leads, like as ESFJ or ENFJ. It happens almost all the time. I always see it, almost always. So it's the ESFP who has boosted feeling, FI, second subtype, is gonna have stronger FE, extrovert feeling, so they're gonna be more emotional, more directive in the emotional atmosphere, and they're gonna look more like an NF type. Their challenge is to find something in their life where they can make use of their strength, but in a manner that still feels valuable to them. The problem is, this person is good at something that they do not care much about. And that is tricky, right? But, you know, especially when it comes to our career, it's important that we go with something we are good at. the best you are at something, the more you're gonna get reward for it, right? So you have to find something where you are good at it, and even if you may not exactly care for the specific thing itself, as long as you do it, for example, in a certain environment or for certain kinds of people that match your functional values, then it's still going to be good for you. Then it's still going to be enriching for you. The good thing about the subtype is that they are more flexible, more adaptable. They're probably the most flexible and adaptable from the subtypes because, well, okay, maybe not the most, but they're quite adaptable in the sense that they are the least attached or tied to their first function. So the second function is almost like their pseudo first function. These people really, they can also thrive in environments that are not accepting their first function, that are a bit rejecting their ego functions. But this can also create other issues because then they might often be in environments that, you know, that don't fit them. And then they wonder, okay, I'm okay with these people, but I actually do not really fit in. And this can create other kinds of questioning and doubts. But still, this is a quite adaptable, flexible kind of person. I know a young woman as an example of someone who is also the secondary subtype. So I think she is an ISFP in MBTI, ESI, and Socionics. She is the SE subtype. So the interesting thing with her is her unique challenge. So her natural tendency has led her to have a hair salon business. So she's really good with hair extensions, anything hair related. And this is where her sensing, boosted sensing comes in, right? But, you know, she is like making sure that women have healthy looking hair, right? Like luscious locks, whatever. So she's got the boosted introvert sensing as well. This is her main strength. But at the same time, she has this like as a side business, and she is more interested in becoming a psychologist or a therapist. And this is where she's trying to go more into the intuition part, also to some extent the logical part, you could say. It can, like therapy, it can kind of also make her use her introvert feeling, perhaps, like trying to, you know, get into the emotional nuances of, you know, her client, so to speak, or her patient rather. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, okay, so your actual strength, your natural strength is this hair business. Like she actually is like already making good money with it. She like is booked almost every day. It's like really going really well. And I'm thinking, okay, this is interesting. Like she's actually doing something that employs her strengths. And she also loves doing it, but at the same time, she's still pursuing this other career that is supposed to be like the main career. And it's not exactly fitting her strengths, in my opinion. This is just my opinion. But yeah, so it's interesting how that goes, right? I think it's her tertiary NI, her tertiary introvert intuition, and just also her like feeling, introvert feeling that is still kind of into this, you know. So she has this interest in it and she would like to do that. But, you know, what is naturally emerging, what she's naturally good at, best at, is her hair business. So this is like what I meant, like with this unique challenge where you are really good at something, but you just don't value it as much, or it's not as interesting as something else. So these people really have to come to terms with this, and they have to find a way to really accept their gift, like really accept what they're good at. It's tricky, it's really tricky, but at the end of the day, this is where they're gonna shine more. This is just how it goes. Yeah, this can create a lot of more nuance. The problem is it also creates 48 types. If you're very, you know, when you think about it, 16 times 3, 48 types. Yeah, this is like very advanced typology knowledge. But yeah, So I do use it in my typing. So if you want to get typed by me, you can find the link down below. If you want me to coach you, or if you want to get a question answered, you can also find the link down below. I'm actually answering and I am coaching the first session for free. The first session is free. So yeah, just go ahead and ask. Okay, that's it. Have a good day. Oh, and subscribe, of course. All right. Bye.